Well, I'm excited to be here. So I'm Dan Clancy. I think y'all know that. I'm CEO of Twitch. And today I'm going to talk about community. And one of the things that I think it kind of fits to be here. One of the things in Australia that's striking about Australia, and a lot of times when I travel around, people ask me what is unique about different countries and all in terms of Twitch streamers. And one of the things that strikes me and stands out about Australia is how tightly knit the Australian streamer community is. And I think that's a reflection of the Australian culture. They all know each other. I go to a gathering with them and they're all chatting because they're excited to see each other again. And so I think it's kind of apropos that I'm talking about community in Australia, because I think everyone here will agree that that is kind of foundational and it's a very communal society, and so it's fun to be here. So thanks for having me, and I appreciate it. So, all right, there we go. So this word community, okay? It's a big word, and in fact, before AI took over all the press and what all of us were screaming about, it was the word that everyone bantered about and said, oh, I've got this community this and community that. And I actually think a lot of times people just threw it around, and sometimes you have these words that eventually they're used so much they almost become meaningless because it's just like an add-on. And so I always, I came to Twitch, that was one of the things that I had to get comfortable using it, because I really do think it is kind of foundational to what community is, because ultimately as human beings, we survived because of our community. I'm going to talk about this later, but we evolved to need other human beings. That's why we are where we are today, and it's foundational to everything that we do, and we seek it at all points of our lives. And so part of what I'm going to talk about today is about how we seek it out. I'm going to talk some about Twitch and how it manifests about Twitch, but about how central it is and how we need to think about it, and because it's a foundation of sort of what it means to be human. So this is a book that I read a while ago, Social, Why Our Brains Are Wired to Connect. Okay, it's a very interesting piece because it talked about why our big brains developed the way they did. And of course, all of us think that what's so unique about being human is our intelligence and our intellect and how smart we are and how we can play chess and all that sort of cool stuff. But as this book talks, and Matthew Lieberman talks about it, a lot of the research suggests that actually our ability to think deep thoughts really came secondary, and that in fact our big brain came from our need to and desire to collaborate with other human beings. And so they've done brain imaging studies where they look at what parts of your brain is activated most of the time, most of the day, and in particular when you're sleeping. And the parts of the brain that are most activated most of the day are the ones that sort of deal with the complexities of kind of humans and the interrelations and gossip and all that stuff, right? Because it's actually really tricky to figure out all these agents in the world and all their motivations and how I'm going to fit in and how I'm going to work. And that's really a foundation of who we are, right? That is why we built our big brains, okay? And that is what led us to depend upon other human beings. We're not the fastest animal, okay? It is because we can work together in ways that are very unique for human beings. And it's a great book because it really makes you think about, as opposed to thinking about humanity and our intelligence, you think about humanity and our social connection as the foundation of what it means to be human, as opposed to thinking deep thoughts. So now I'm going to jump to a definition of community, because again, it's a word that we'll banty about. And there are lots of different uses of the word, but I'm going to go with this one, a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. For me, a big part of this is this sense of belonging, right? This sense of having people who accept me for who I am. I think one of the challenges we all face is we didn't evolve to grow up and live in boxes. We evolved to be with other people and not always be judged and evaluated. I think in today's world, that's the problem. You're always feeling like, am I doing well? Oh, are they going to like my talk or not? And will they like me? And I think we're much more designed to be with other people that we feel like they accept us for who we are, okay? And one of the things when I talk about community, I'll talk about the online world, but I always like to start and talk about the real world, the physical world, and how it permeates everything that we do. And By the way, I'll mention some of the examples I'll use will be American culture. I think they often transform, but I couldn't get the good examples for here, so some of them will be American culture. So one I'll talk about is one of the things that is very big in modern day life is our total fascination with sports. Okay, so how many people here are sports fans? Okay, and it's a big part of your life. And so why is it that sports is so big? Well, I think it's really about community. We're just looking for something to share an interest in and something to have that thread of connection with another human beings. I often talk about between any two people, there are these threads of connections. And whenever one of those threads is activated, you treat them differently. Okay, so one of the thought exercises I often do with people is I say, think about if you see a homeless man on the street and how you feel about it. Now suppose someone told you that they went to college with your brother, right? Now you're going to feel very differently about them. You might take some money out, you might feel, and why? They went to the same college as your brother at the same time. Why does that matter? But it's because it's a thread of connection, okay? And we yearn for these threads of connection, and when you have them, you're much more giving to other people, okay? So in this example, last year I went to a U.S. American college football, and I think when you look at college football, it is the epitome of people's yearning for this connection. So I went to Georgia versus South Carolina. I was visiting a friend down there, and I went to a tailgate event, okay? And it really was kind of stunning because they have this one plot of land where people buy these little squares that are big enough basically for an RV, and they cost I think like $40,000 to buy that plot. And they would buy 4 of them, and then they would build permanent structures to use 6 weekends of the year. So they might spend $240,000 to build a place where they'd have their TV, and all because they're tailgating, okay? And it is literally the highlight of their year, okay? And I think it is not because they're so interested in the intricacies of the offensive line and the running back pulling back and the wide receiver in motion and the quarterback dropping back. It is because of that shared sense of belonging, right? It is because of that sense of other people with shared interests, right? It gives them a reason to get together and finding a place to belong. So for those of you that aren't sports fans, like whenever you get frustrated with your mate because they're saying, no, I gotta watch this game, I gotta watch this game, just remember, this is just their way. And you may find a different way to find your, for example, there, obviously with Twitch, there are a lot of people that game, right? And that's the way they find it. So really, this is a story of our search for connection with other people, and that's why sports is so, so central for so many people. So with that, I'll talk about this other book. This is called The Village Effect by Susan Pinker, okay? And now this is one of these things that is, as I talk later about Twitch and online interactions, one of the things that she talks about in The Village Effect is how important face-to-face interaction with other human beings are. And I often add this term face-to-face, it's synchronous interaction. So meaning that we are both experiencing versus online asynchronous. I put something, I come back, I get something later. It's talking back and forth. But how important physiologically it is to that synchronous interaction. And so she talks about some studies where they look at the effect of face-to-face interaction, and they compare longevity and the value of being with people that you care about. And so in fact, if you have someone who is, let's say, a 50-year-old smoker, and they have a choice, should they stop smoking, but then they can't hang out with their friends that smoke all the time? Or should they keep smoking to hang out with their friends all the time? You'd think, oh, they should stop smoking. It's actually a toss-up as to which one is the best thing to do in terms of longevity, right? You can go either way because actually that interaction is really foundational to us living a long life. And of course, one of the things we all challenge, which is we're less connected than ever now because of the world we live in and how busy we are and how we move around, especially with consistent interactions, okay? one of the things I often talk about is a big part of community is all this slowly developed over time. It doesn't come just one thing. It's lots of lightweight, shallow interactions that when you add them up eventually become a deep, meaningful friendship, okay? So here, now I'm gonna talk about another book that I like a lot. It's called Lost Connections by Johan Hari. And this talks about some of the challenges when we get in today's world in terms of depression and anxiety, in particular lost connections. And it goes through a lot of the research about some of the foundations of it. And in general, what he finds is most of the reasons are lost connections to different things, such as lost connections to our planet, lost connections to other people, lost connections to meaningful work, right? And a big part of that, he talks about how, as we evolve, he talks about some research from John Cacioppo, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correct, and about how it became natural we evolved. If you think about in the savannas of Africa when we were evolving, if you wandered away, you felt lonely. And that was because we evolved that way so that you felt lonely, so that if you left the tribe, then you wanted to go back to the tribe. So in fact, depression and anxiety is actually a very healthy thing that causes us to seek out other people, right? And so it didn't just randomly evolve as a dysfunctional thing, it actually evolved as a functional thing to help us seek that connection with other people. And of course, that's where some of the challenges we face today, because people feel less connected, even though it is critical for their mental health. And of course, I'm not allowed to give a talk about something like this without mentioning Bowling Alone, which is one of the first books that talked about how we are less connected than we had been in the past. That from, I think he talks about from 1985 to 1994, community organizations dropped 45% in terms of involvement in that. And in the 1980s, when they started the study, on average, people had 3 close friends, but by the end, most people couldn't identify one close friend, right? And so in this world where this was already happening, this is where social media came in, right? Social media came in when there already was these weaker connections, and I think overall, I think there are a lot of great things that have occurred due to it. And I think as I'll talk later, one of the things we often talk about the problems, but many of these things that offer problems also offer lots of benefits, and it's about really trying to balance between the two. And early on, this ability to be connected to other people was really kind of pretty great, right? Because you had friends from high school or college you hadn't talked to, and now you still feel connected to them. And so early on, it really helped. But then this evolved over time, right? And one of the big things that evolved with is the mobile phone, right? And the mobile phone now became something that we all know that we're all, tethered to. I had to put mine on mute so it wasn't buzzing while I was up here, and my watch wasn't going off, and I wasn't wondering, oh, what am I missing? And that has changed a lot of things. And in fact, it's something that I think we all need to think about our connection, and how at times it's incredible because it allows us to be connected to other people. But at other times, it gets in the way of that connection. In fact, our ability to engage and interact. And so a recent book by Jonathan Haidt talks about the issues that are raised in terms of anxiety and depression with the advent of the mobile phone and social media combined. Okay, and this chart that is he's shown a lot shows how for girls in particular it's jumped up, and for boys not as much, but also significantly right about the time that mobile phones and social media became central. And this is not just about what it does, it's about what it sometimes substitutes, right? Because sometimes what it is, it's a substitute for that face-to-face interaction, for that synchronous interaction, okay? And this chart here talks a little bit about, hold on, it did not switch, about a study that asked them if they wished a particular services to Gen Z, about whether it never existed. And you can see some particular, they highlight certain ones that they felt like, oh, I don't need it. Maybe I don't, maybe it would have been better if it didn't exist. And it's lower for other things. And one of the things in this that I think has happened is in some ways things have become a little antisocial, right? As opposed to you're swiping on your phone. That doesn't connect you with other people. You're just sitting there kind of by yourself doing this, okay? And ultimately, we want that connection, okay? Now this is where, interestingly, gaming comes in. And gaming is a very interesting thing. So I'm a parent of two, now 26 and 22, but you know, my son was a teenager and he would get into gaming. I myself, even though I'm the CEO of Twitch, I am not a heavy gamer because back when I was young, they didn't have consoles. So I just never built the habit. If I was growing up today, I would, most like everyone, I would game. One of the things I often do, I no longer, even though I was using the word gamer, I often now use the word people who game. Because the term gamer, you get an image in your mind, okay? And I'm sure there are tons of gamers sitting in this room and none of them fit the image that pops into your mind when you think of the word gamer, okay? It's people who game. But of course, gaming is huge. $200 billion industry, larger than film, music, TV, all combined, okay? So what is it? Why is it so big, okay? Why is everyone doing it? And I think the word is connection and community. That in fact, what people often forget, they like, if you're a gamer, you know this right away. Okay, you're like, well, of course. But like, I know I used to have to talk to my wife about this with my son because she's like, I can't believe he's gaming. I can't believe he's gaming. And you know, I said, look, he's just looking to hang out with his friends. Because whenever he was gaming, he was hanging out with his friends. And you know, one of the biggest things that happens now is with Discord, groups of friends get on Discord and they're hanging out and they're talking to each other and you know, they're feeling connected. And that's better than just binge watching whatever is the latest Netflix show sitting by yourself, right? Now, I'm not saying it wouldn't be great if they were face-to-face, okay? I think face-to-face interaction is incredible, but you can't always be face-to-face, okay? And furthermore, there are a lot of people that don't have that close-knit group of mates and friends that they can get together with face-to-face, right? And so I think one of the reasons gaming has exploded so much in this time is that yearning for community and connection. In fact, in his research, initially Jonathan Haidt thought he would see similar negative impacts from gaming, and it wasn't nearly as clear. Certainly there are examples of people that spend too much time doing it, okay? And you can always find examples of anything, of things that sometimes are counterproductive. But I think the reason he didn't see that when you looked across the whole thing is because of the foundational connection that it provides, and that sense of belonging and that sense of finding a group that you belong in. And I think this is particularly important for marginalized individuals, marginalized community, people that maybe have disabilities and other things, where that allows them to find other people that they can connect with. And this is one thing I'm going to talk a lot about when I talk about Twitch in a second. I think a big part of this is synchronous interaction, right? The foundation of trust is lots of little interactions over time. I use this phrase that all deep, meaningful friendships comes from lots of light, shallow interactions. You don't know who is going to be that person. I was talking to a streamer last night, and he talked about how he had given this another streamer a raid where he sends his audience over just randomly. And eventually, like 2 years later, he was going to their wedding and he was in their wedding, right? And it was just this very, you know, unexpected connection that then led to this deep friendship where he was there for the wedding and really foundational for them. So this is coming back to this concept of community. I think one of the reasons so many of us find many of our good friends when we are in college is because there are lots of light, shallow interactions condensed over a short period of time, okay? And we all have kind of a shared purpose, and we're all open for looking for those connections. And it's much harder once you go out and in the real world, you may see someone that you really like, but then you might not see him again for 4 weeks. Then you might not see him again for 6 weeks. And you might really like them, but if you just don't see them that often, then it's very hard for that to really become so foundational in your life. We need to get comfort. People too often think it's about, you know, the people you like the most. It's actually so much about the people that you have a connection with because you spend time together, okay? With that, I'm now going to talk a little bit about Twitch. And I suspect for many of y'all that came here, you know something about Twitch, okay? But I'm going to start with trying to explain it about, for so many people, you know, for those who don't experience it, what is it that, you know, makes Twitch so meaningful for them? And I think it comes down to this word community that we're talking about. And it's often grouped as a social media platform, but I actually think it is wildly different than the other social media platforms, because whenever you talk to somebody about it, it's finding this group where you feel like you belong. Most people that watch Twitch, they go to like 4 or 5 channels and they go regularly to the same channel. So then they start recognizing other people in that channel, okay? And they feel like, oh, now I'm, you know, I have a group of mates that I can just go with when I'm feeling bad, when I'm feeling down, whatever. And the way I sometimes describe it is so many people, they're just looking for something to kind of hang out, and they can start whenever they want. They can stop whenever they want. And they can get interrupted in the middle if need be. If you're gaming, when you start a game, for any of you that game, you know this, or any of you have kids that game, you don't interrupt your child if they're gaming. They're like, no, I can't do that. Because you start a game and you're committed for 25 minutes. You've got to be there. If you start a new episode of Game of Thrones, you're emotionally committed for 50 minutes or an hour, okay? And if your phone buzzes or you get interrupted, you can't turn away. Whereas with Twitch, you can turn it on. If something comes up, you can check out your phone. You can lean in. You can lean forward, lean back, lean forward. It's really what, for many people, channel switching used to be. You kind of find something that was good enough. It's what sports is for a lot of people, because you can put it on and you're not like needing to pay attention each moment. One thing I often talk about is I think this same need now is met with a lot of the TV shows that have become really popular on streaming platforms. So everybody's familiar with shows like Friends and Parks and Recreation and The Office and New Girl, and how people just binge watch them. My daughter has watched every episode of New Girl, I think 10 times, literally, okay? And I realize it's really kind of, for her, the same thing that Twitch is for some people. She already knows the narrative arc of the show. So she's not trying to figure out what's gonna happen. She can turn it on at any time. She can turn it off at any time. She can get interrupted in the middle, okay? Here's the key. She feels like the characters are her friends. If you notice, all those shows are quirky friend groups. The family dramas aren't the shows that get played over and over again, okay? And that is because we have this parasocial connection with the characters. And in fact, when you haven't seen them in a while, when she hasn't watched New Girl for 3 or 4 months, she kind of misses her friends, right? And she wants to turn it back on because she has, in her life, like lived in that world. And the interesting thing is, with Twitch, it's a similar thing, except it's not this parasocial with you know, fictional characters. It's actually with real people there that if you're having a hard time or had a bad day or had a good day, that you can share it with, okay? And that's very different than other social media, because other social media is very individual. It's about what you're doing right now. And even when you talk about live streaming, one of the key differences with Twitch is we build the app so that you pull up and chair and stay for a while. You're not like just watching it for a little while and then swiping to the next thing and swiping to the next thing. So I like to talk a little bit about my own experiences because, all right, there we go. When I became CEO, I started streaming regularly. And one of the interesting things, when I came to Twitch, when they initially were recruiting me, I actually turned down the job to go and run product and engineering there because I wasn't a gamer. And I thought, oh, this doesn't really fit me. I'm not a gamer. They came back 4 months later and said, no, Dan, we really think you're the right person. And it was only after being there that I really realized how gaming is, you know, just kind of the thing that is going on on Twitch, but really what it's about is community. And one of the great things that I learned by streaming myself, because when I became CEO, initially I decided to start streaming to kind of experience it firsthand, but I didn't think that I would necessarily keep doing it. Now I do it because I enjoy it. I don't need to keep doing it. I can be CEO without streaming regularly. But when I'm home for a week and I have time, you know, I always try to make sure I get at least one stream in. I play the piano and sing. And it's one of these things that I had never done that in public. I did it at home, right? But, you know, and a community is formed around me, right? Initially, they might come to see me because I'm CEO, but eventually they don't stay because I'm CEO, right? And I'm not a big streamer. I get like, you know, we use this term, average concurrent viewers. I'll get home like 200 or 300 at any point in time. But the same people keep showing up, right? And so I get that same feeling, and when I'm traveling, I'll stream with other streamers, and my community will show up. And so that sense of having people that care about what you're doing really is, you know, kind of special, and that's why I keep doing it. I keep doing it for the same reason so many other people stream. It is because they're having fun, right? Here I have a few pictures that just came back from TwitchCon, and one of the magics of TwitchCon is it's Twitch in real life, where I think all these people come and show their real colors, and they get to experience it and be who they are, okay? So one thing I like to talk about, since I know some of the folks here are marketing and brand, I like to talk about the intersection, because one of the important things is brands are trying to create an emotional connection with their audience. And what they're trying to do is reach someone at the time that they are emotionally engaged and positive, so they get a positive brand association, right? And that's what's happening when somebody's on Twitch, is they're open to that connection, okay? Now, lots of people think of Twitch as a gaming platform, and there's a lot of gaming on Twitch. But the thing that strikes me at Twitch is the incredible diversity of people that come. I've said we've always been a talk platform. It just happened that people were gaming. So I'm just going to go through some of these people that make their lives, frequently funding their lives by streaming on Twitch, that I get to meet and I'm like, really? So this is a guy paleontologizing. He's a paleontologist who quit his job at a university as a paleontologist to fund his life by streaming on Twitch, going on dinosaur digs, right? And it kind of boggles your mind to think that, wow, he can do that, right? But he has a community that loves to watch him go on dinosaur digs. We've got Sea-Dog and Rob CD. Sea-Dog's Australian, Rob's from the US, but they both live in Japan. And what they both love to do is basically just bike around Japan. So this is them going around, biking around Japan, and they have people watching them and hang out with them to kind of experience with them while they are biking around. And they just do this all the time. Or sometimes they'll come down here, but a lot of times it's just biking and going on different trips across Japan. Brox is actually from New Zealand, okay? And he does wood carvings on stream. And he's Maori, and he comes from a traditional family, and he started streaming, and now that's what he does, and he gets people that watch him do all these wood carvings. Shook Wan is an Australian-based IRL streamer that he describes his content as blue sky content, where he's showcasing Australian scenery, fishing, or camping, or other things in Australia. Well, yeah, there it is, okay. Because for some reason I was seeing something else there. Microsoft PowerPoint is not responding. Damn, Microsoft got me. Oh no, I had my phone on, they were listening. Is that what was happening here? Okay, they've got this going. We will be right. But, and this was the one where I want the visuals, right? For the rest of them, I could just ignore the visuals and just keep going. So, well, the next one I was gonna show was Wildlife Cam, okay? And Wildlife Cam is an example. They basically put a camera up in the back of their house for animals to come, and they have feeders there. And when people give money and donations, it shoots out food. Okay, and so squirrels come by, raccoons come by, and they still have their regular job, but they said, yeah, this was enough that allowed us to afford to, like, you know, add an extension to our house, right? And hold on, next one is Wildlife Cam, right? And you can go in the middle of the night and you just see wildlife hanging out there, and people are chatting with each other while the wildlife is getting food. This is Pizza Princess, and she runs a pizza shop. That's what she does. And so she's making pizzas all day, and she gets people that sit there at any given point in time. She might have 1,000 people watching her make pizza and run a pizza shop. And this is a fun clip. This is the only one I'm going to have with audio, the next one, which is Kai Sanat, who's really one of our top streamers. And it's an example how modern culture has kind of weaved in here. This is with him and Kevin Hart.
You got to say it like that. Rainbow, thank you for the 100 gifted.
What the just happened? What the just happened, bro? What the just happened? What does that mean?
A select roll with the 50 gifted. Appreciate thank you for the 50 gifted.
What the? Did you just have a stroke?
No, that's how you gotta say. You gotta say, Rainbow with another 100 gifted.
Okay. What the are they giving you, man?
Okay, so basically imagine this, right? He just paid
Okay.
for 100 people to watch this stream with no ads.
Who the does he think he is?
I think he's
you piece of
what?
Who do you think you are?
Huh?
Is that a good thing what he did or a bad thing?
No, that's a good thing.
Take it back. Take backsies, Rainbow.
So I thought that was a fun clip. Kevin Hart basically did a sleepover with Kai. And it's an example where it's just this authenticity of coming out. So now I'm going to talk some about for good and what people do for charity. So Maya Higa runs the Alvea Sanctuary, completely funded through Twitch, which is basically a sanctuary for animals that did not have a home and were looking for a home. Last year, I participated in Jingle Jam, where they do all this crazy stuff with cats. It's Yogcast. They do 14 days, 12 hours a day. They raised $2.7 million last year. And they've raised over $25 million since 2014 by streaming and doing goofy things with cats. It still kind of boggles my mind. Iron Mouse just recently set the world record for subs, all in a fundraising video. She has common variable immunodeficiency, which she's been raising money for. This is Trash is an Australian streamer, and Radress, and these are not big streamers. Some of them do small things, and this is just with able gamers raising $500. So you see this, all sizes streamers doing stuff to try and give
love
back.
Twitch
So this
charity.
is a quick splash video.
This is the best week ever.
Talking some of that going on.
I love doing things for charity.
We are raising money
For the American Heart Association.
Best Friends Animal Society to support Extra Life. I will simp for St. Jude until I am dead.
It's for the kids.
For the kids.
For the kids.
This is for everyone that has donated.
Oh, wow, we have $1,000.
10,000 dollars.
230.000 euros, ni un récord en el IVA inéfico.
Grande Twitch.
Para ayudarnos a llegar a la meta. Thank you so much.
Synonyms for thank you. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, just thank you.
Thank you for bringing us all together for good. I truly believe that the amount of good that we can do on Twitch, it's just amazing to see.
Thank you for the $113.
All right, so now I'm going to loop this back. As I said, I started talking about community, and of course, the thing so foundational for Twitch is community. And now, of course, it would be irresponsible of me if I came to South by Southwest and didn't talk about something that, of course, I think it's in the contract when I agreed to come talk here, which is, of course, I need to talk about AI too. But I am going to loop this in. I am going to loop this into community. And so my background is in AI. So I got a PhD in AI. I worked at NASA running their autonomy and robotics. And I actually think so often when we think about AI, we misunderstand human intelligence. Okay, so by the way, I'm not an AI doomsdayer. All this terrible stuff is going to happen. I think bad stuff will happen. Okay, but I think but in general, lots of good stuff will happen. And I think so much of our confusion with AI, if we just called it cool algorithms early on, as opposed to artificial intelligence, that'd be completely different. Okay, and I actually think we've gotten a little lost in what is human intelligence. Okay, and so I like to talk about this term about human intelligence. And I think we undervalue the complexity and sophistication of human intelligence and what we can do in this world when we say it's going to be as smart as us. I mean, when I was growing up, I had a calculator that was a hell of a lot smarter than me in math. I don't know about you guys, but this idea that it can do stuff that I can't do, computers have been doing stuff that I can't do since I can remember. Okay, so just because it can do some things doesn't mean it can do all that I can do. So I'm going to do a quick thought experiment here, okay, just about as we think about human intelligence and our ability. Suppose you were going to try and describe your living room to somebody. And let's suppose we sat down for 12 hours and you described your living room to me. There's a couch, you described the fabric, you described the pillows, you described everything. Now suppose I went into that, I went into your living room. Would I even recognize it after you described it to me? I might not. Because really what you have is this linear sequence of words trying to describe a three-dimensional space. And in fact, a linear sequence of words is incredibly insufficient to describe a three-dimensional sequence of space. A painting, which is a two-dimensional representation, better, but still nothing like the nuances of that three-dimensional space, okay? I kind of think about that and the way we think, because I don't think we think in a single dimension. We experience thinking linearly, right? We experience thinking of I do A, then B, then C. But some of the research that so much of the way we behave is not what we experience in our thinking. I kind of think of our experience of thinking is that linear description of the living room, whereas what's actually happening in our brain is this three-dimensional thinking that we don't actually experience. Sometimes I like to do this thought experience when we talk about the big brouhaha that happened around OpenAI. And think for a second if all of these players were actually AI bots and not human beings, right? And think about all the backroom stuff that people were doing when this was getting resolved, right? And some of it they were thinking about it, but some of it they were building relationships. They were depending upon relationships. There were bonds, there were connections, there were all these things that actually were a critical part. It wasn't just about, you know, logical reasoning to resolve it. It was about relationships, it was about connections, it was about how people felt about the company, about them staying, about them leaving. And really, it would not have been resolved. You can't even imagine this happening if these were AI bots, okay? So when I like to think about AI and you know, what might happen and all that, whenever there is a big change in the world, the Industrial Revolution, there's obviously negative things that can come from any big technological change. And you know, with Industrial Revolution, they didn't realize that was going to lead to global warming. With social networks, they didn't realize what could come from that. All good things also have bad things that can happen. And sometimes we like to think that we can anticipate and prevent the bad things from happening. Suppose somebody went and told someone during the Industrial Revolution, knock, knock, years from now this is going to cause global warming. Do you think they could have solved that problem back then? We can't solve it now. There's no way they could have solved the global warming problem at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And suppose someone told everybody when social networks first hit about the issues that are going to come in terms of interactions. Could they have solved the problem then? We can't solve the problem now. Okay, what do we think we can solve the problem then? Are there going to be challenges? Certainly there are going to be challenges. That's the very nature of technology. The challenges is not with the technology. It's actually with the people and the use of the technologies and the connections and the relationships that they have. So if there's a concern, it's not with AI. It's about the degree to which we're divided and we can't actually find resolutions and find ways to deal with complex, difficult problems. And AI ain't going to solve that, right? Go ahead and type into ChatGPT, how do you think you can solve the political divide that is happening in this country or that country or whatever and make it so that it's not so much conflict? I don't think OpenAI is going to have a very good answer for that. And if they do, call me, because I'd love to know what the solution to that problem is. You know, I'd love to see what they thought about trying to figure out global warming and get real action to kind of stop that, because I don't think it's going to answer that, right? And that kind of goes to, you know, a lot of people are familiar with System 1 and System 2 thinking. Right? And System 1 thinking is this three-dimensional thinking, right? That is the foundation of being human. And what many people don't realize are, and I'm not going to go into detail about System 1 and System 2, but System 1 is that intuitive and that unconscious, or some people think that emotional. And really 95% of what we do is driven by that. And in fact, what usually happens is our rational brain finds a justification for what we want to believe. And where do so many of our beliefs come from? Our communities. We believe things because our friends believe things, okay? And we are seeking that belonging with other human beings. And in fact, that causes us to believe and share the beliefs that the other human beings that we care about have, okay? And for me, I think the biggest testament of that is when you look at some of the things we believe, right? So, you know, we've got people that are convinced that aliens have come to Earth, right? We have Sasquatch. I got this one picture, which I guess is an Australian Sasquatch. I forget the name of it. But the one that strikes me the most, actually, is flat Earth. I'm going to go out on a limb here and think there are not a lot of flat earthers here, okay? Just guessing. Recently, this musician, John Craigie, has a song where he talks about, yeah, I went to this flat earth convention. You know, they have conventions. And he says, yeah, you know, there are a lot of cool people there. You know, I would go to a round earth convention. They just don't have any, okay? I'm just looking for someone to hang out with. I'm looking for someone to listen to me, okay? And the reality is, that's why they believe in flat earth, right? Is because of this desire to have other people with shared values and shared interests. And it's not because they've rationally analyzed all the data and determined that conclusively we have a flat earth. It has nothing to do with that, right? And so, this is how I bring this around, because I think too often we forget about that is the foundation of what it is to be human. It is that connection with other human beings, right? And we get caught up in our reasoning and our thinking and our brains and all that stuff, because it is quite impressive, okay? But really the foundation of being human is that connection to other human beings, right? And in that sense of belonging, right? So what I often like to say is, as you think about the future, and all these things that will happen in the future and how technology is going to do this, don't forget what drives us, right? Because what drives us is connection and belonging and being with other people, right? And ultimately, that is always going to be more powerful than this or that, you know, being able to get to work easier, right? I think too often we think, oh, great, like if you had to trade off between getting to work faster, but right now you hang out with your friends when you go to work, which that's not how I get to work. But again, it's not all about speed, efficiency, you know, less time, less money, less that. No, we're just looking for excuses to find community with other people. And so think about that as you think about all the technology you hear here. Thanks for being here. Originally, I wasn't sure if I was going to have time for questions, and I don't. But I'll be up afterwards, so sorry, that's what it goes. And also the questions, sometimes it wasn't designed very well for questions. So I really appreciate y'all having me, and looking forward to saying hi to all of y'all, and hope you have a great